Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Like 200 watts of 300 pump panel.
I'm not able to hear you. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Algae Lake. This was back in the 80s.
Mark, we're still muted. That's why. Can you hear me now?
Working the quist.
No, that's fine. Now I can hear you. Yes.
Very good.
He had set
Thank you.
charcoal burners with rags on it to go. Well, unfortunately for him, he set the timers wrong because the one underneath the electrical panel went first. So when the fire marshal got there to check out, they called the fire marshal and he said, in the garage, there's the setup, right? Very good. We'll call this meeting to order. Call the special council meeting for February 27th to order. Looks like Mark Utzinger was going to join us via Zoom if possible.
He is here. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So I see your agenda for a second, quick. We're here at reference the agenda item that number B, memo that says council priorities. This is a follow-up meeting from our previous earlier meeting. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, the city administrator at this time, to go through everything. And I'll leave that with you.
Great. Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mayor Ryan. Good evening, members of the council. We are here tonight to, as a follow-up, as the mayor said, to discuss and hopefully make some decisions on our 23-24 city council priorities. So what we have tonight is just a recap. In January, at the end of the month, we went through some high-level discussions about a lot of the major projects that were happening within the city, the things we would like to do over the next couple of years. So we reviewed our strategic plan efforts. We had a lot of conversation about status of different projects, funding options, timelines, a variety of things. And as we all know, we talked about a lot of different potential things that could be happening. And we worked to start to plan what those goals would be for the next 2 years and set those up to get us all, just to recap from the last one, aligned. So aligning the city council's priorities for what you feel would be the benefit and the focus for the community, and then that would establish expectations and tasks for staff. Tonight, what I'm hoping that we do is basically we're going to decide, we're going to make some decisions on what those goals are, and hopefully the information I provided will help walk us through that conversation. Let me switch to Excel because we can see it a little better. I'll use the mouse. So for Councilmember Utzinger, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the materials in the packet. Item B1, thank you, Kiki, just one after the other. So hopefully you can follow along. Just let us know if you're not tracking with us. Before I do that, I wanted to just highlight the memo that was in the packet. I wanted to provide a little background on the conversation that we had in January, and also talk about some kind of major funding components to the conversations that we'll have that will impact. So as part of the projects that we'll talk about tonight, there is a component of bonding. And I propose for some of the projects that we consider bonding. One of the obvious ones we've talked about previously is our road bond, and we do that every 7 years. But outside of that, thinking of opportunities where it might make sense for city hall improvements and things like that. I think we should have a conversation if that is the right option for the city to utilize in some of those respective projects. So one thing I'm working on is determining if we can issue a bond for different kinds of projects. If we can, bundle those into one bond issuance, because we need to have a certain level of bond dollar amount to make that sellable in the market. So we can't just, this $200,000 project, we don't want to issue a bond for that. I don't even know if we could for that small of amount, but we want to make sure we're using our dollars appropriately and kind of maximizing that if we were to issue a bond. So we'll talk about bonding for some of these projects. I also provided a little more information about fundraising and the idea of creating a fund with the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation. Trying to set us up and have a structure for how we fundraise, how we solicit donations, thinking that we're going to have some projects that will have sizable dollar amounts to that. And maybe there's some interest potentially for community members to participate in that process. If we can create that mechanism now, that will help staff to market that, to can communicate that and for the council as well. So I do also provide some information about that, and we can certainly talk about that more. And then funding as an impact on staffing. A lot of these projects are pretty complex. There is an element and/or an expectation, if you will, about incorporating grants in some way with these projects, which is great. We should, look at any opportunity we can for grants, but researching the grants, writing the grants, administering the grants, that becomes a lot. And the capacity, I think the question of capacity we should be mindful of that. And do we hire that out with a consultant? Do we contract that? What can we manage in-house versus, with another third-party assistance? We want to be mindful of that as well. Not probably things we have to decide tonight, but I want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. Do you have a question, Mark?
Well, I just had a thought, and I've been thinking about this for a while. I mean, it's pretty complex with the funding, the bonds, writing. And I think it would be good to put it to an outside group, or is there a way, I'm just throwing this out there to get somebody. I see a need for PR fundraising and somebody that can do these bondings. I don't know if that's somebody that we hire or if that's an outside firm. I think PR is a big deal that we need, PR marketing. And I think that would help with this. So I don't know if that's
Sure,
something
I
we do.
understand. Yeah.
Try to do it in-house, hire somebody, or if we go with the outside firm. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas on that.
I guess, yeah, I'd agree, with what Mark is saying, the first, as we go through these things, would be to define the rules, who's going to be in charge of it, how we're going to do it, saying that we're going to do bonds, say that we're going to do marketing, fundraising. That's all great, but we need the right people in the right place and the right steps to do this before we can really tackle any of it and be efficient and effective at doing it.
Sourcewell offer those options? No. It does the Minnesota League of Cities? No.
No.
Do you have any organization in mind?
Not from a PR marketing perspective.
Okay.
I'd have to do some research on that
Yep.
side.
And then another thing I would add to that actually is also on the back end of the project, back end meaning when the construction would start, project management portion of it too. It's advantageous to have professionals in that space take over that portion, so it alleviates that burden from city staff. And if that's means outsourcing that to a third party as well, including that or budgeting that to the cost. Another thing to consider.
Yeah, great feedback. And I would say probably for combination of all of those potential needs, the information here doesn't reflect the depth of analysis from that perspective. So we'd want to talk about that more. I think I'm hopeful that we can identify projects that we want to continue to pursue and then say, let's incorporate components of those things. Absolutely. I think that would be appreciated in trying to improve overall quality of communication of what's happening within our community to the public, and then also help alleviate some of that on staff, I think would be great. So thank you for that. And the last component I had on my memo was just with reference to engineering, really small at the bottom. There's a lot of projects here, and we're going to have really in-depth conversations with Seth, being our engineer at this time, as far as capacity for projects. How does that look on scheduling? We know that we have been working on a couple of significant projects, being the roundabout and the trail, and we've given them the focus on this and make this your priority. But what else do they have capacity to do? We'll want to make sure on the front end that we're talking with them to make sure that we don't set them up to not deliver what we're looking for.
One of the things I spoke to Jenny about on engineering, and this has come up in the past years too, prior to the three of you being on the council, is, certain projects we might have to just put out. We might have to bid out for engineering. It might not go to our city engineer, because we may not have the time to wait for them to catch up. So we may have to bid out certain projects. Woodset has an excellent working relationship with our city staff, and we've been with them for years. But again, that doesn't mean there aren't other engineering firms out here that can handle things. And we have done that in the past on some of our roads where Anderson Brothers actually did the engineering, but they won't do it if it involves a number of different things. If it involves city sewer, city water, utilities, that they don't want to touch that. They'll do just like a basic road reconstruction. But, on the engineering aspect, that's the important thing, is keeping things moving forward. So we might have to consider that. Nothing against Woodset at all. I don't have an issue with that. It's just, there are other firms out there that can do things, so.
Question, does the city have, if you take a step back further, is there a plan or an outline put together on how a city tackles the project, conceptual thing, what triggers a committee to be set up, what are the steps we take, preliminary drawings, all that? Is there actually a framework put together that the city uses over and over, depending upon if it's a roadway project, a building, or something with the parks? Does that exist right now?
I think with our work in our strategic planning, that's part of the goal, is to have that information early enough to be able to know what are those trigger points, what timing can we start to see for different departments' needs that would then engage a conversation. So historically, I would say no. I think it can certainly vary by department, just there's so many different potential needs and impacts to that. But so I don't know that one document would work for everyone, but certainly a helpful idea to continue to build that as we have these conversations. If we could do that, that's great.
Right. In that document, there might be some not applicable, right? But at least it still gives the same framework to go through each and every time and be consistent on what we're doing across the board, when you tackle any big project like that. But just having that set down, there's a lot of benefit in that, and also a lot of cost savings, I think. And so that's what I'd recommend to do, is to start with something like that and get the foundation down on how we even look at tackling a big project and what are the steps that we're going to go through. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that.
I think we did do that to an extent with the parks, where we hired HK. Yeah. We hired them, and then they came in and they did that on the front end. This is what you're honestly looking at. This is just, and we ended up with the document that we approved the other day. So yeah, we do that. I know with the roads and streets, having worked with, as liaison to them for 4 years, the Public Works Department, that's one of the things that they do. When we're coming up for a road bond, it's identified which roads have to be done, and then each one has its own unique issue or problem depending on what's happening. But yeah, just something, I think one thing that this long-term planning that we've started has shown us is to what was mentioned in here is, there's, you got two choices. You basically where we're at, staff can just spend all their time doing this project and figuring it out, but then who's going to do all the other work? So we don't have, I mean, I think we've never had this long-term before. So having something like that would be very helpful for each department. And just a general, I mean, you're going to get to a point real fast where you're overwhelmed with the project.
Right.
And I think a prime example is the trail. I mean, the trail was overwhelming for not just one department, but all of us. I mean, a lot of people. And so being able to subcontract that is great. Or does the city eventually get to a point where you add a person that does that? And what does that look? So I'm more of a, if we could subcontract it right now, fine, but eventually I don't know what will happen, but I like the idea of having, the idea comes up, the department head pulls it out, starts ticking off things. And if you get to number 6, we need somebody else to do it. Would be nice,
I'll send you a project kickoff sheet that we use for our businesses. Easy frame of references to look at and obviously
Awesome.
modify.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome.
Right, and then even I'd say, data component, if we take like the park project, and look all the way through, after the park's built, then, have we established how many more staff people that we're gonna need now to take care of and maintain the park, We should think of all that on the front end, doing this big park project, obviously 2
Yep.
people can't take care of it.
Yep.
And, all the way comprehensive, all the way through, even down to details like that, I think that would be
yeah.
helpful in decision making.
I think, not speaking for the old council, but as the one person that was here from the past councils, that was something that conversations were had that, yeah, it's not going to work with one maintenance person. I mean, we know that. And, that goes back to that if people want to say, well, why are we keep hiring? Well, what don't you want? It's a park. It needs to be maintained. It's roads, it's everything. If we're going to build it, maintain it, then to your point, is absolutely correct. It takes bodies. Most
Yeah.
likely.
So I would just say, trying to figure out that whole framework all the way through would be the place to start as we tackle all this.
I guess what I would say is, yes, I agree with that. The way I see it is that we're gonna need to build that framework along with this conversation to keep things moving forward. If the council wants to keep some things moving forward, I don't want to stop some projects, or I don't want to not do things, but I think we should make a very intentional effort to make our lives easier in the future with these decisions by saying, let's build that framework as we go and make sure we're putting things down on paper to have great checklists and questions asked for future.
Right.
So-
And there's a lot of stuff like Jesse mentioned to send you that's regularly available that we can apply it right now too.
Yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
so
I'm
we
sure
don't-
modification would be
Right.
pretty easy to do. So absolutely. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So what I'm planning on doing here is you have 2 spreadsheet documents. One was referenced at the top, citywide projects 2023 to 24. And then there was one 2025 and beyond. I believe we should spend most of our time tonight talking about the 2023-24 spreadsheet. If we have time or you have interest or questions on the other one, we can do that. Certainly if something timeline doesn't make sense to you, we should talk about that as well. But my hope and my recommendation for tonight is we're going to go through each project. Some won't take a lot of time, some may take a little more time, so we'll just work through each one as efficiently as we can. I will give a high-level overview. I won't go into each line item, but high-level overview of the project, general timeline. With each project, you'll see in orange, there's a reference to a staff lead person or multiple lead individuals. And what I'm looking for from the council, and we can do this like each one, you can make your decision, or we can sum up all the feedback at the end. I'd really like, if ideally, that the council will approve the 2023-24 document as however modified by the council tonight, that will be what we have set as our priorities, and staff will know what to work on for the next 2 years.
Do you want it approved per item, or do you want it approved? I guess I'll ask the council now, do we want the whole thing presented to us and then make our comments, or do we want to do it per items? For example, the CASA 77 roundabout project is in progress. If she discusses that, if there's anything that you have to say about it, and then move on, or do you want to wait till the very end and try and move on and talk about everything at once?
Let's just go project by project.
Yep. I'd go project to project.
Okay, we'll do that. So we'll let you
That's fine.
explain it,
Yes,
and then if we have questions, we'll ask.
Yep.
At that time when you're done explaining.
okay. Perfect. The other thing I will say is this is, of course, our best understanding, best guess of timelines as of now, especially projects that are multi-year. We can't say for certain all of the components in the time frame. Obviously, we have points that we would follow up and provide you updates, as well as cost. I tried to incorporate costs where we might need some kind of study done or something like that. It's just a best estimate. There are variables with that as well. So with that, we will start on our first project. So there are 2 projects, they're on the first page that I have referenced that are in process, the roundabout project and the trail project. So both of those, I believe we are moving forward with them unless there's a major roadblock that comes up in the meantime. We want to continue to see those to completion. With that first one, the roundabout project, we will be opening bids on Wednesday. The council has a meeting scheduled for Thursday to hopefully award a contract if we have a favorable bid. And I've identified that bid process, some communication and outreach efforts that staff is working on now, construction timeframe, basically summer of this year, and then completion of the project. Questions, concerns?
This just
Approval of
dawned
that?
on me.
Yeah.
As a concern.
Okay.
This project construction schedule is gonna potentially be, well, potentially, I'm assuming we're gonna be green light go for the trail. Those are similar construction schedules. On a detour route where the trail is going.
Mhm.
No,
The official detour route is not Lower River Lake Road.
is not.
It is not. So while.
Oh, that's
probably-
right. It's going around, is it 76 to 29?
Yep,
Okay,
70, 78, I think, to 29.
never mind then.
Yes. So while that will
That
be.
would have been a conundrum otherwise. Wow.
Yes, and a lot of logistics will be needed if both projects are awarded, and same contractor, different contractor, would definitely have to work through that.
And the bids, I believe, are being opened on March, well, this week, right? I think it's
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
yes, yes. So with that, does the council want to make a motion to approve that as a continued priority for 23-24?
Yeah, I have one more question on, in regards to the marketing plan. What sort of, what would that entail for a project like this, a roundabout?
Yeah, so Amber and I are working on a joint marketing effort for both projects. We are working with Lakes Printing to have postcards mailed, big postcards that will direct, there will be websites for both projects. It will direct individuals to those websites so that they can be updated on all the information. We are basically blanketing the entire Grandview area and north all the way, all the neighborhoods and streets around Lower River Lake Road. I have a mailing list from the city of Lakeshore because they're going to be with this as well, and then up through Hazelwood Drive. So we're trying to communicate out as much as we can with that mailer so that they have the website information. And obviously then we'd update on social media and continue those efforts that we're working on, but wanting to get a direct contact out to individuals and try to have that set to go next week so that they get that information right away.
So then one question too, then I'm just wondering as I look through this, then for staff lead, your name is on there. Would Tom be a part of this too? And Amber or different people as the project goes, or how does that transition?
Yeah, certainly for construction. That is definitely part of that coordinating across all departments. Hard to articulate all of that, you know, in a sheet to talk through that, but yes, certainly Public Works will be involved. Parks, planning and zoning, we've talked with Bethany as well about if there's any permitting more for the trail, things like that. So we'll ensure we're working on that, but since this was something that started with me mostly with the grant writing process, I just kept my name there as well, but yeah, construction, that will definitely integrate more staff.
How much in Nokomis is gonna be really changed on this, other than the first portion of it? Most of it will be on county right away, won't it?
It will go into a section of the city road, but not, I mean, we're not getting to Forest Avenue or anything like that, but it'll probably get about halfway down, I would think.
Okay.
Is the county the one providing us the information on this project? Is that how we're getting, because it's a county project technically, correct?
What information,
On the roundabout,
but like what?
timeline, schedule, stuff like that, road closures, cause the county is the lead on the project because it's their road, correct?
We are the lead on the project.
We are. the
We
lead.
are, even though it's their road, yes,
Even
so,
though it's their road.
yep,
Okay,
yep.
yeah, I was just wondering how,
Yep.
who is the lead, the county or the city?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And Woodseth is doing this one. That was I know Grandview, the county wanted to go out for bids. They did. We were with them. We went out, they went out for engineering bids, right? So Woodseth will be overseeing this,
Correct, yes.
not
We have
necessarily,
contracted with them.
not necessarily Joe, but somebody
No.
from Woodseth.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
okay. So you're looking for a motion from us to
Accept.
to accept are you looking at just 77 or that and the trail?
Just 77, and then we'll just, I think, very high level touch base on the trail, but
Okay. I'll wait for Jesse to get back, or you want to go ahead?
I would make a motion that we move ahead with the roundabout project on 77.
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any questions? Okay. The only thing I'm gonna say, if I have any questions, I would encourage staff, the rest of the council to do it too, is shoot them to whoever the staff lead is. Email or text or whatever, write them down, and then we can get them answered. When we have updates and stuff, then we all kind of know where everybody's at and stuff. So I'm sure some of us will think of things others didn't, and some of us may not think about it at all. So I don't know. But anyway, I have a motion and a second, no further discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, carried. Okay,
okay, next project is the Gull Lake Trail, our phase 1. It's in process. The trail committee met tonight and is making a recommendation to the council for your meeting on Thursday to award the bid for the base bid of the project to Anderson Brothers. We will wait for Lake Shore is having their meeting tonight as well. So we will make sure to coordinate that and bring you that information on Thursday. But presumably all signs are pointing forward, moving ahead with the project. And this would be to complete Hazelwood Drive and Lower Roy Lake Road.
I don't have a question on this, but a comment after sitting through the Gull Lake Trail meeting that we just had. I would really encourage if anyone has questions about the building or the costs, because the breakdown was at the meeting was pretty good. We'll all get that update. But it's a bit convoluted to me. But I understood it. But I think that if you have any questions about costs, where we're going, we're only going to Roy Lake or to 77 and Roy all the way back down to there. And then but if there's, any questions financially or where we might need to pull some money from or whatever, how much or whatever as the project progresses and we keep going, make sure you get a hold of Amber or Jenny. So, because we may have to make it, I mean, we do have options available to us for some additional funding, so.
And we will have information for the council on Thursday. It's a bit of just a short time frame to try to work through all those variables, but yes, certainly anytime.
Do we want to talk about the potential shortfall based off of the meeting we just had?
We can, yes. I mean,
We can be
it
brief
has
about it.
come up, yeah, with the
Yeah.
council before that there would be a potential funding shortfall. I don't think that the shortfall will hopefully be as significant as we were anticipating originally, so that's great. Something the council would probably need to think about now is your support for contributing city funds above and beyond to see that project through. It will be a likelihood, I would say. It's something you should expect, and we should talk about we can talk about more now on Thursday as well, but just to know that that potential's there.
Thursday's fun.
Yeah. I
Is
think
that
Thursday.
something that you can put together a list of options for us to look at where the funds would come from?
Yes. I think it'll be a short list, so yes.
Yeah.
Remind me.
Are there any more questions on the Gull Lake Trail Phase 1 in process? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to go forward with the Gull Lake Trail 2023 as presented.
Okay,
Second,
okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Go back.
Great. On to page 2. The first item we have is for the fire hall roof. We propose to, as you know, the fire hall needs a new roof. And we propose that staff would obtain 2 quotes for a new roof by April. And present those to the council, approve one of them, schedule the work, and get that project complete. The council would have to, probably based on the quotes, decide if we'd use general fund reserves or ARPA funding would be an option for that as well. The estimated cost when we talked about this a year or 2 ago was about 80,000. I just put in 90 because everything's more expensive, so it'll be a little more expensive, but that would be the information I have on that project.
How much funding is left in the ARPA? Roughly 70,000.
No, we have over 100.
Okay.
Okay, 150.
All right.
I mean, I don't see us having an option. Leaks bad, so we need to move
Gotta
forward
be
with
done.
it. I mean, we need to keep it. It's a good building anyway, so.
And this is not to
To
say-
Joe's other point too, is there we've already kind of gone through this, what needs to be done, right? We know that there's a list of what has to be fixed. I mean, that obviously the roof, but then there's the thank you, skylight that has to go away and
That's
stuff.
part of the roof, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
and that's all laid out in the project. Okay, that's what I thought. All
Yep.
right. So,
And tonight, you certainly could. I'm not asking for you to make decisions saying, specific to the funding source specifically, but
right,
you might want to have the quote and then maybe decide that. You can decide it tonight as well. I'm looking for more that we're spending the effort on the project and working to get that information for you. So just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Right.
Yeah, let's just get the project going.
that's where I'm at. I mean, if we've got the money in general fund. If we have to, we have to. If we have ARPA, it's not that we can't afford to do it. It's just been put off long enough. So.
Is there anything else at the fire hall that is in dire need of repair, replacement? Okay. Is that something that we can look at right now? Because they're close to what, 20 years old? Is that, well, I would suggest we take a look at those or have somebody look at them to see if, because I don't want to get caught. You know, you get the roof done and then all of a sudden next winter, it's like
Right.
furnaces. Is that something we can look at now? Okay. And then, if we can, I'd like to see that back, shortly. Couple of weeks. Is that doable or not? Okay. I'll just leave it up to you as to when we can get it done.
You're looking at two different contractors. You're looking at a roofer or depending who the contractor is, like.
Well, there are some that do both.
Yeah. Sealants, yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
The only other thing to have somebody out there look at is all the weather stripping around the overhead doors. That's just kind of an ongoing thing, but needs attention.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve, moving forward with the installation of a new roof for the fire hall as presented.
I'll
Getting
second.
two quotes, for the roof.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, oh, sorry, you moved.
The radiant tubing in the fire hall definitely needs replacement. That is shot. There's, I think half of them aren't working is what I believe,
That's something
but the
that,
actual forced air furnaces are still working fine to the best of my knowledge,
Oh.
but those. the
Yeah, I
radiant-
thought you were talking about the tubing. So
No,
Oh,
no, no,
yeah.
no,
I think the furnace is fine, but the tubing.
yes,
needs
that
correct.
needs to be replaced. And I don't have a quote for that. I don't have a good cost estimate for you on that. But I can get it.
I think we should get it. Whether we act on it or not in conjunction with the roof is one thing, but I think we should get it. So we know what it is, and if we
Mhm.
can get one done, boom, have one contractor in there, but just get it all done.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that's one building off the list. I mean, other than the minor stuff that you're always gonna have for building upkeep, so.
Yeah, and there's some other smaller stuff, but I think that's stuff that we had budgeted for that we could just get done, like I think the bollards in front of the doors, to protect the doors, need to be replaced,
Okay,
so. But we
Alright.
had a plan for that already. So
and that's something that you and your crew could work with.
Mike had
The
talked
fire
to
hall.
a concrete contractor to take
Yeah.
care of it.
Right. Okay. And remember too, for staff, just sometimes at the end of the year or towards the end of the year, your budget has money in it that you didn't expect to have. Sometimes some of these smaller projects can be ticked off at that time too. So, but then how long does it take to get the item we order? That's another item, I think so. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Next project is City Hall improvements. So I believe it was in 2021. Widseth did an assessment of our building and provided information to us from three components. One is the roof issue and some structural improvements that need to take place. The second one was looking at interior remodel, improving workflow and service to the public, opportunities, things like that. And then there was a component of adding an addition off the back of the building. My recommendation would be to look at completing the work for the roof and the structural improvements that should be made, new windows, things like that. And also looking at a component of the interior remodel. Not to say that looking at doing all of that, because some of that related to the building expansion conversation. So I'll say a scaled back version of the interior remodel. But looking at doing those two components of that and incorporating the security system, keyless entry that we had been talking about for a while last year, and also possibly a generator separate from the pickle, because we will be talking about the pickle here in a little bit, and I think that might be its own significant standalone project. So looking at those two components and with the potential that we would issue a bond to get that work done. The steps involved would be finalizing or getting updated cost estimates on all of those components, finalizing the design and layout needs with staff and with WITSET, working through those components first, getting a final plan, if something that everyone agrees upon. And then potentially, if it works out, then we would issue a bond early next year to then make the improvements.
I would say that we want to definitely do what we need to do to the building, roof, windows, stuff like that. I also think looking at a generator, or the security system, kind of minor things like that, but to start to remodel in here and stuff, I think that's a bigger, question or down the road. Also too, as we talked through a bunch of this stuff over the last couple of weeks too, and with staff, seems like we're talking a lot about the potential for more staff needed in one area or the other. And so if we had the need to create or rearrange offices or do anything like that, I think we should get our ducks in a row and know what we're looking at before we decide to just do a remodel at this point for offices and staff. That's my two thoughts.
That would all be part of that number one, right? Finalize remodel plan, designs, layouts and stuff, what that would look like.
We could certainly talk about impacts, future potential impacts to office staff. And if there was anything to be aware of, we have a lot of space and we have existing cubicle space, office space, so that space exists to add capacity, which is great. So we have that opportunity already, so I wouldn't anticipate that would go away. But certainly making sure we ask those questions, for sure we could do that. If you were inclined to allow us to explore that remodel plan, we'd definitely make that a part of that conversation.
I won't want to spend any money to explore it. I won't want to contract for drawings or anything. I would want to explore it with a discussion. So.
Didn't they put something together for us already?
Oh, yes, we have a concept design and we have all of that, and we wouldn't ask them to update anything until we knew more specifically what we wanted to do. So yeah, some of those conversations would happen internally to start. But then certainly once we had our final list of things we wanted to accomplish within the inside of the building, we'd want WITSET to update that information and actually give us plans to use from that. So
Have you
yes, I
seen those,
understand.
Joe? Have you seen any of that stuff?
I think I saw something, concept
Okay,
on some of that.
All right.
So, yeah.
just making sure that.
Well, if it were
everybody's-
me, I mean, if we start doing the windows repairs, concrete, so forth, one of my concerns are the two windows. I mean, you've got the window where Maggie's at. To me, that's not a very safe, secure area.
Right.
Also where Bethany's at. I know it's great to have it there for when people come in. But I'd just like to see some safety there.
Mhm.
I mean, what are their thoughts on it?
Right.
Right.
And we have new staff, because I don't think Bethany was here when we did this conversation the first time. So we'd want to, re-engage and have conversations, and more time has passed. So what does that look like for everyone, and get some specific feedback, or make sure we remember. I'm guilty of that. I'm like, oh, that was a year and a half ago. I don't remember all the details. So we could certainly start with that if that was something.
Maybe a
Would be
little
helpful.
workshop with the staff to
Yep.
see
Yeah.
everybody's needs and, get everyone's input across,
Sure.
what everyone's wish list may or may not be.
Mhm.
Yeah, And also, but the roof repair, I know in discussions with Tom in the past too, is the uncomfortable feeling is gonna be when you start getting into things from where the leaks are and that we're gonna find things we wish we didn't find, most likely. It's very potential that we could have some other issues because of the leak and everything. The other problem is that this will be the second time that we've had to fix that roof. Many times. Obviously, it's a structural default. Something wasn't built right. I mean, or some designed right or something, because I mean, yes, a flat roof in Minnesota doesn't make a lot of sense, but you would think they'd have been able to put some slope in there to get the water away and channel it away. And the first time they did it, but obviously that didn't happen. So I don't disagree with what you're saying about, you know, final designing. What does staff need? What do they want? What would work better? And then we could meet with them and find out and, you know, where we're at. That could be part of a bigger project, but does that run into, if we do the roof, we fix some of the windows and we fix the exterior, like where the block is, you can literally pull the block out by hand if you want. I mean, needs to happen,
Yeah,
that stuff. But then
guess-
if we wait on an actual remodel, I guess the only reason I would say go ahead with remodel and everything is if we need that to be part of a bond to get other projects done. But I don't think we're ready, you know, for it maybe yet. I actually need a copy of the plans and everything again that Woodseth did to look at it again.
We could
because-
certainly also update the entire council on that process. And I didn't delineate this, which would have probably been helpful for you. The structural improvements component of that, when the report was issued, was about 300,000.
Okay.
So the remodel, and actually, I'm guessing the remodel was probably more, but I was trying to say, I think we'd end up with some kind of pared down version of that. But so you know, from a need, the structural number was 300,000 a year and a half ago.
Yeah, so I'd say that we would want to move ahead with that need component
Structural
as,
stuff.
yeah. And I would say that, you know, that would be defined by Tom, what the needs would be on that. And that we'd want to move ahead with, you know, getting contractors out, looking at all these needs, getting estimates with that. And then set up a time to figure out the wants and all of that with the office staff.
Do we have any warranty on the roof from the last repair? So we don't necessarily have to use that same contractor or roofer. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we don't necessarily have to use the same roofer. Okay. So again, we're taking bids and, you know, we make our call from there, but
I mean, if we keep fixing something that just doesn't work, can we just look at changing it? I mean,
It would be
Yeah.
completely changed. Yeah,
right.
it's a brand new roof on top of the existing.
If I may make a comment, can you hear me?
Yes.
For me, as far as, I think, what are we doing here? What do we want? And, what's necessary, like, what we're saying. But I think number one is the integrity of the structure. And number two, for me, it's a safety issue. I think, with the way, unfortunately things can happen, it's very important to have that safety side as well. And also a functionality in case there's an emergency. So I'm thinking of the generator. We need to be functional in case of an emergency. I think if we look at that way, those are the three priorities that need to be put into this type of discussion.
Can we go back to what Tom was saying about the roof?
In the concept, plan too, but the idea was that, you know, you have a peaked roof on both ends to extend that peak over the center portion that leaks.
Yeah.
It might look a little different, but that was the idea, that would get the water to shed, but then the windows would be replaced, and then how that's interface would be different. I don't know the details of that,
Sure.
but it would definitely be different.
Yeah.
And to me, you know, this is a metal roof over the top of this. To extend that the rest of the way would probably eliminate 99% of the chance of that problem happening again.
Right. Yeah, and that's the way that I think we should go at bidding it or looking at it.
But yeah, and the structural stuff has to get done.
So my question for the council with that is, if we're trying to move forward with that piece sooner than later, what is your thought on funding?
Once again, can you put together a list of the funding options for us on what that might be for that component?
I guess I will say that it would be the money that we have already in our reserves. That's our option for that.
So,
We can put together what is available for total dollars. But I just want to be mindful of that as we talk about
so yeah,
all of
I
these
mean,
projects.
it needs to get done. I think we want to go ahead knowing that we have to use the money out of the reserves to do it. You know?
Right, unless we are gonna end up the potential of bonding for multiple projects.
There's nothing budgeted for this project.
No.
Yeah, either way, we need to go ahead with it.
Well, we need to start getting,
My recommendation would probably be bond rather than general reserve funds. I don't have another comment. I guess that's just really it. I would rather see a bond, I guess.
yeah, at this point, we only have reserve funds, bond it, or levy it. Those are the three choices we get. And I agree with Jesse, bonding it makes a lot more sense, although just the bond for this would be too small probably to be very enticing for people to pick up. So I think we need to move forward with getting quotes, getting things, you know, for the structural stuff. We need that for sure. If we can update quotes and stuff that we've already gotten, I think we should do that. I think that we should have staff input as to a remodel. What does that look like? And I think we should have it all done no later than, giving people a chance to bid stuff. I would like to see us have a May council meeting date. I mean, I think that's plenty of time. Tight.
That's gonna be tight.
How about June?
Possibly what I would need to do is go back and look at the Widseth report, which I will send to everybody. So you have that to see exactly how many components we're talking about for the structural piece.
Mhm.
That's the priority. So we want to look at that, and Tom and I can connect on that. So
Well, we're on hold. I mean, building materials are building materials. Whatever decision is made, your time to get them, when you can get them, when a person can come in and do it, etc. Even if it's something we have to bid early in 24 to get it done. Then we'll know the actual cost, and that might dictate the bond. So.
sure.
As far as the funding goes too, maybe we just continue through the rest of this and see what money we'd need that's not accounted for right now.
We could
See if
certainly
we could
kind of
bond-
pause on the official answer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bond more stuff together or.
Well, that's
stay-
what, that's
Yeah.
what we're,
comes out of the reserve.
that was the thing in the memo that I saw, that how many projects can we bond? And boom, knock them all out at once. That would be nice.
Now, we're gonna meet in April with another city council priorities, correct?
No,
All right.
we have a retreat scheduled. That is more for staff to have, instead of the time that they had with council during the budget season in August last year, they did all their department updates with you. That was the time we wanted to have more time set aside, talk to you about their priorities, upcoming budget needs, things like that on the front end, so that the council has that information and we can hopefully use what we're doing with these projects and give them feedback on what should they be planning on budgeting for? Things like that.
Could,
I was just wondering at that time, can we also discuss what they, the wish list, as we said? If they have ideas of
remodeling?
with the remodeling and stuff, what their ideas are, what they would like to see. Can we put that together with that April
Specific to
meeting?
the remodel, yes,
Okay.
definitely. I was gonna say overall, we've vetted the list, but yes, for that project, that might make good sense for timing. Mhm. Yep.
And then,
And that would include if they, as they see additional personnel being needed or something down the road, like we've done in the past, because we have done that in the past.
Yeah,
Okay.
then they can let us know if there's a foreseeable need for staff within this building,
So I
then
think
we would
ci-
have that information.
City hall improvements, we want to set it aside and continue on the.
Yep, we're gonna,
Okay.
that is no problem. Camp Lincoln Road parcels. So there are a few phases to this project. The must-do requirement from the county is to put a bathroom at that location by the end of 2024. But we'd like to look at phase one, which would consist of building the road, the parking lot, and the restroom. And I threw a number out there, a range, because depending on what environmental or archaeological studies we would need might dictate what those costs are. But we'd like to spend 2023 and do that initial planning work to establish exactly, we have our Parks Master Plan now, so we have a picture of what, like where the road would be, what the parking lot would look like, but we now need engineering plans for that. So looking at the work we can do to get that prepared so that in 2024, we're ready to do that infrastructure, put the bathroom in and fulfill that requirement. And we would propose that we would use either city or park funds for that initial planning work, potentially some grants if they're available. We'd look at that option as well. And then for the construction of phase one, we have city funds as an option. We have the bond as an option. We have grants as well. But this was something I did put in my memo potentially from an infrastructure perspective. It seems somewhat logical to think, is that the city's investment in this park to put the infrastructure, and then anything future, we're relying on donations or grants or things like that. It's just an idea to consider. But certainly we could look at grants. What I'm hoping to do, I think it's really important that we just do what we can to get this part done. So we set ourselves up for the next couple of phases in 3, 4, 5 years.
Just so everyone's aware on the council, I have talked to some of the people that live down in that area. And I did remind them that this particular park exists because people didn't want this purchase from the county to be used as buildings. So they approached, I was approached by a couple people down there when I first got on council. And and that's kind of how this whole thing got to be where it's at now. So it's a city park. We wanted something minimal, et cetera, that kind of thing, not a lot of maintenance work having to be done, but there's gonna be additional maintenance work. And I did say, I kind of planted a seed in a lot of their minds down there, hopefully that, if they were willing to talk to the Lake Association and some of the neighbors and stuff and help us maybe contribute some donated funds, or kind of go out like a friend to go at Camp Lincoln Park or whatever they want to say, and kind of raise some money to help the city do this. The main purpose of this was so that they didn't have, we were preserving this wild area for them. So there's, hopefully.
But kind of back to my statement last time and what Mark said with the marquee and whatever, it just, let's try and sit down and figure out the overall plan and function, how this is gonna work throughout the city, and who's doing what rules people are in, what the bonds are, before we just, so to speak, stumble into this again. I still think that overarching piece is missing. How are we gonna market it, John, to those people down there that wanna do it? What's that plan? are we gonna have the funding set up specific for this? Forgive me, what's the place down Brainerd? That people can donate?
Community Foundation.
Community Foundation. You know, I don't know, you know, we have the construction of this bathroom and stuff, you know, for 127,000, you know. I think before we want to go ahead and pull the trigger on something like that, we need to set ourselves up with the proper timeline to go at this, you know. Very likely there's some of those people that might want to donate, and the bathroom now becomes a $200,000 facility instead of a $127,000 facility, you know. But we have to do our steps in going at this project in the right manner to allow that to happen before we just go into it. Make sense? Comment? I mean, and so that, once again, it's getting the framework, it's getting that template down on how we're going to start doing all these projects that I think is still, in my opinion, missing, you know, from an execution standpoint in that the city. So it's my comment.
I guess I would be looking for something very tangible and specific that you could use, like pick one of these and say, this is
Yeah,
what we're looking for, because I feel like this is direction and specific enough for as much as we want to start with for 2023. We're saying we're gonna work on these components. So I'm just.
So, you know, and once again, you know, is this going to take more staff? Is that accounted for? And then does this trigger us getting more staff in the budget for Amber for next year? You know, if we're going to do this year, you know, how does that work through?
Well, no, this is part of that overall park plan that we approved.
Yep.
This was in that park plan. The actual building of the trails, or to what extent trails do get built or whatever, that is a subsequent part. If we don't have it done, like if we don't have the bare minimum in there as per the county's demand, then what happens? We have to give the land back, and then they'll sell it. But one of the reasons this land wasn't sellable is because the county, when they bid it out, did not let people know that we had this zoned a certain way. And when the county was made aware that the zoning on this parcel was what it was, and that whoever bought it would have to come to us to get it rezoned, and that likely wouldn't happen. So that's, you know, that was another part of this thing. So I don't know what would happen. But to your point, Joe, I agree, but I think we are specific what we have to do. But you know.
And if I could, maybe this helps in part. We have the capacity to do this initial work for this example specifically. Amber is aware that this needs to get done, and she's planning on doing that research initial determination work as part of the Parks Master Plan conversations. And so that's why she's on the staff lead for that. So she's prepared to do that. Yes, if we actually put in infrastructure that then needs to have staff maintenance, I would say the parking lot and the road, a very minimal impact to staff operations, but the actual amenities within that property itself, yes, we're going to want to make sure we talk about that before we actually do something or really get into the nuts and bolts of that part of it. But staff is aware, and we discussed this today as far as if they had any concerns about doing this work that's listed here, and everybody seems on board with that. So I don't know if that, because it's kind of a two-part thing that I think you're thinking of, is we want to make sure we're not overloading people, and then also what are those long-term impacts?
Well, I think Joe's got a interesting idea there. I mean, it would be kind of nice. I mean, we have to move forward. It has to be done by December 31st, 2024, but it'd be kind of nice if we had the engineering to come in and say, here's your bathroom, it's just a little hole into the ground, or we can do this. This is what this cost would be. That was that cost. Invite people in, especially from that area, to say these are our options that we have. this one we can put in for this, their city can only cover X. But in order to get that, we would need some funding. I don't know.
The county has a specific design.
Yeah.
It's a drop-in.
It's a vault. It
Yeah,
has to be
so
a-
that's,
It has to be a vault. I know that.
yeah,
Yeah, but the facade of it.
Right.
You know,
sure.
could
Yeah,
change.
there may be additional things that come with that, certainly.
Yeah, I guess I'm just challenging us to, you know, maybe go about this a little bit differently in our process and just try and define, you know, like the marketing piece, the advertising piece, think all the way through to how we're gonna maintain it at the end. To just give the community the best park that we can, you know, and think through all those things on the front end.
Right. And if we were just starting this park and we had a little more time, I get it.
Cause it's by December of next year, right? So we still have a full year on it.
How, I guess this archaeological stuff and all this other stuff is just all these costs that we get to pay for. Gets old after a while. But how long would it take to get that done? What's the timeline on something like that? And we can bring it back to us and say, yes, go or not go. I mean, those are other questions too.
Well, that's why I gave the 2023, because I don't know that we've really gotten into those details, but we need to. And we need to figure out exactly what is all encompassing with what we have to do, what we don't have to do.
We have a drop dead date, January or December 31st, 2024.
Right.
So,
The biggest thing there that can hold you up is the archaeological. So I mean, that would be the most important. That's just my opinion. I mean, because if they find something.
Right.
You're dead in the water.
who normally does that? Is that something that
tribe.
Amber would do, or Joe, or like the engineering firm
We,
does
we
that? or-
contract with, or Amber's been through this process now with the trail, so there's certain people who can assess that and make those determinations, and so we'd have to contract with them to give us the okay, or here's what we found, or however.
Well,
that
we're gonna need
works,
to
but-
do that regardless of what we do.
Correct.
Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and get that done?
Determine the or
Yeah,
conduct an archaeological study.
yeah, and then, and we don't have the engineering for where the bathroom's gonna go yet and that kind of stuff.
We don't have the engineering, no, we just have the design idea from the master plan.
So hold off on that until we get the archaeological done, because all of a sudden, if they say we found something on this side of the property or this side of the property, it's gonna change all that.
Yeah.
So we don't want to go ahead with any drawings.
Right.
Until we get this done, or we're gonna waste money.
That's fair.
It's
So I
fair
would-
to include environmental in that, just any
Yes, yeah,
environmental impacts.
Environmental and archaeological study in that, and then get that done and then bring it back with the findings and we can go from there.
Sounds great.
So I would even say if they come in to Amber and everything looks good and there's no conflict of where the bathroom's supposed to be, then give her the go ahead to get the engineering in.
Yeah, they need
Well-
to feel more comfortable making the next step.
Yeah.
Yep.
But at the
absolutely.
flip side, this gives us time then on the marketing. What does that look like? How do we engage
Mhm.
people down there and stuff? So we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So maybe what does that look like? Who would you want involved in that? How do we want to put that together? And I would engage council to say, give your ideas to city administrator on that aspect. So that we can get it put together and she can work with, all of us. And then we can hopefully engage some of those people down there as well and keep everyone in the loop and. So even people that didn't want to see it happen down there have changed their mind when I've talked to them. They're actually looking forward to having a restroom on their walking path. So.
So does council want to make a motion on that, just to complete the environmental and archaeological studies as needed and bring that result back to the council this year?
I so move.
I'll second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay,
Next item is city park improvements. This also goes along with the parks master plan, looking to kind of create that framework and set ourselves up for what hopefully would be a logical sequence of a lot of things that will be happening at the parks over the next handful of years. Our phase one recommendation for 2023 is to establish fundraising goals and create a roadmap for implementing a local option sales tax. So we would look to partner, again, that's my recommendation. I'll take feedback or other suggestions. Partner with the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation to create a fund. So we have that vehicle to utilize for donations and fundraising. Create what that would look like, tiers of donor levels, things like that. The foundation would be a great resource for us to utilize in that regard. So we would have some support there, and then also so we'd want to get that done in May. I believe Amber's goal would be to have materials and information for the public that we can advertise, promote, have signs out at the park, things like that, to say, this is what we're looking to do and how you can participate and support the city's initiatives. And then also create a roadmap for you for what that local option sales tax process would look like. And I'd recommend I'd have that to you by September, assuming that that is something the council is interested in pursuing. Ultimately, to bring to voters in November of 2024, a lot has to happen between now and then, but if that would be a way, then we would set ourselves up for future funding of the parks improvements. So I think that needs to happen first, and then start to work on actual design and layouts for phase two. We have playground and pickleball courts. Phase three, the outdoor ring swarming house, and garage might happen a little concurrently. Again, trying to predict all the steps in an order, but we know that these are the major significant pieces to the parks improvements at this point.
First question, is there a budget established for Amber for funding and marketing purposes? Spend?
No. I mean, I'm sure she has a advertising budget, but it's this much.
Right.
So,
So I would think that would be the first place I'd want to look at, like, if we're going to go about it, let's do it correctly and give her some sort of budget that we're going to see tangible results from, not just, hey, we only have $1,500 to make this happen. Let's sit down and come up with a realistic budget. So, we can make this as nice as possible and reach as many people as possible. So that's the first spot that I would kind of say that, maybe we could tackle that. How people want to define that. There's many options for that, but yeah. And then the sales tax thing, I think that's a bigger community question, I was thinking about that after our last meeting. Maybe that's something that we could even get on a ballot sometime just to see, what the community says about that. Would you be opposed? Yes or no? I would want feedback on that, as well as more information.
we could
from
do
the
that
state.
via surveys in
survey,
the
sure.
meantime. Yeah, because it would be on a ballot
Sure.
in November of 24.
So, just some of those things for ideas, so we'd have the knowledge of what the community wants as far as that. But I'm all for it, but once again, I just want to tackle it the best way possible. And
Right. I know, yeah, it has to go by law, it has to go to the voters. And the sooner we can get information out so we can answer questions. And we can get answers for ourselves too, then the better off we are. So November 20, and you have to get, how does that work? You have to get voter approval before you can approach the state? Otherwise, you gotta,
Legislative approval. So
you
we
gotta
have to
put-
have the request to the legislature by January 31st
of 24.
of 24, and then
Okay.
we will work through their process. So by May, we would know if they have approved it,
Okay.
then we would be prepared
Yeah,
for
get
the
it
ballot.
backwards.
yeah, and I'm just looking for general information ahead of time,
Mhm.
because,
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not a big proponent of adding more tax.
I know the University of Minnesota, I read online, the extension program, they do an analysis of how the split with the revenue. We know that we generate about $400,000 a year with that 0.5% sales tax. But what would be the split for visitors component of that versus homestead taxpayers, for example?
Yeah.
So that would be a very interesting piece of information to further identify the impact that our area has with our visitors and our
Yeah.
recreation and things like that. So that could be,
Do we know the sales that come into Nisswa in a year's time?
no, I just get the $400,000 response when I ask the Department of Revenue.
Department of Revenue knows exactly how much sales tax comes from Nisswa. And then it's, if you add the 0.5 cent, then they figure it from there. But that was the same thing Bob Bureau. Do you have all his info? Did I ever send you all that?
I think so. That was a
Okay.
couple years, yeah.
Bob Bureau was
Yep.
on the park or plant Public Works Committee at one point, but he did a lot of that because we were thinking, that would be a way to fund roads and streets, but it turns out that the legislature doesn't really give money or doesn't mea culpa for that as much anymore, or if they do, I'm not sure that it was, but because then that would, if you did that, then that becomes a revenue bond, not a general obligation bond, correct?
Mhm.
If you were to bond for the parks and you had a 0.5 cent sales tax, or do you just?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, correct. Yep. So what I'm hearing from council is you'd be supportive of the two items noted for 2023, along with establishing a marketing budget, bringing recommendations to council for that, and also incorporating how do we get some surveys, some community input on the sales tax question in general,
Yeah.
as we put together more information so they're informed when they're giving us their feedback.
So how can we get Amber a budget sooner than later? Is that something that we can
she does have
create
money.
tonight or no, or?
Yes, you
make up
certainly
or-
can do that. You can certainly just ultimately the general fund, I mean, parks obviously generates revenue with their programming, but the general fund supplements the rest of that. So ultimately, the council can decide that you want to just allow the parks X amount of dollars for.
Do we have an
Marketing.
estimate on what you were thinking to spend already on marketing budget or what you felt you had available?
I don't, but I don't know if Amber's brainstormed that.
Not a specific number for marketing, no.
Do you have a number in your head that, hey, this would be awesome, I could do cool things with it?
No pressure.
$1 million.
Yes.
Bad question.
It's a need, not a want.
Return on investment,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
We could bring it back in March, or, I mean, I mean, you can assign, obviously, if you want to grant some funds now, but, or we can, Amber
But
can look at
I
that.
would say bring it, give some time to figure it out, because I would rather have her know, I don't want to lowball it and then have to come back again, but at the same time, I don't know that it's gonna be, because the city itself is gonna have to do some marketing on the 0.5 cent sales tax angle of things. So kill two birds with one stone, maybe.
Well,
But-
yeah,
So I mean, what, I guess, for marketing, I mean,
Or maybe Joe has some suggestions.
You're doing a $10 million project, and so if you look at a percentage, of a $10 million project to market something like that, you gotta look at it, but I don't know, 3%, something like that, spread over a multi-year time, I don't know. 3% of 10 million, it might seem big to people, but I don't know. I think this is something that we have to get creative of, also get people involved with, 4th of July, stuff like that when town is busy, and go at it and see what we can. We have literally billions of dollars stroll through Nisswa every year. I don't know. I think, we could maybe also reach out to some other cities see what they've done recently, but this is an area that I think that we'd see a return, and I wouldn't want to skimp on it. I would want to do it correctly.
Do we need to give Amber or both or the time to do exactly that? I was thinking the same thing, reach out to some other communities that have done it. Maybe communities our size haven't, but some bigger ones surely have. What did they do? How much did they put in? Was it enough? Was 3% enough? Is it more than, I mean, I don't have an issue with marketing. I'm trying to figure out where we're going with everything, but I guess that would all be, to me, that create the roadmap. I mean, it can all get plugged in there. And then the next question is back to what we started this out with a while ago. Does our current staff have the time to do that?
That's why you need a PR marketing.
Well,
That's,
Yeah.
what we talked about, we gotta define some of these roles, because I mean, this project's 10 million. I mean, we have a lot of work and projects and span of control, and, having the same names for the lead underneath all this, it's like something's gonna be missed, we're gonna be spreading ourselves too thin to do it correctly.
well, I know marketing firms and things of that type of thing, like David Drown and Associates. Do they do stuff like this? No. Do you hire, do you look at that? Because then the I's dotted and the T's crossed can save you a lot of money down the road. So then maybe spending a little bit on a firm to do it
Right.
isn't
So-
such a bad deal.
I guess maybe I'd make a suggestion where we'd start just looking at a neighbor in town, go over to Crosby, look at that. I think it's Red House Media with that Aaron Hodala that's marketed Crosby in the trail system. But,
Do you know about them, Amber? Okay.
I believe I'm correct on that name. That,
You're right.
but, yeah, and that's maybe where I'd start. They're doing a good job over there in Crosby. Let's see if they can help us over here in Nisswa.
So on this specific roadmap that you put together, I don't have any personal issues with it. I think it's a good approach for the city park improvements. When it comes to the optional sales tax, I think if we're gonna put a survey out there, similar to what we did for the recycling center, should we put a timeline by sometime in the third quarter so we can have it data gathered by that point, so we can then get prepared for putting this into Minnesota State Legislature by the end of January 24.
Yeah, certainly. My initial thought of September, I mean, maybe it needs to be moved up a little bit more, trying to do, so we have time to incorporate that. But yes, no, absolutely. We want time to get the feedback, be able to digest, understand it, and know how we move forward and have some time to do that.
Want to make sure we get the word out on any survey and stuff while the summer folks are here.
Mhm.
We gotta get everybody, So.
So it sounds like council is supportive of the 23 tasks with looking at a marketing budget and bringing back, we can engage. The firm mentioned, I wrote it down, anyone else, and try to bring some feedback back to the council for what that plan would look like. Okay,
As
that
soon
sounds
as,
great.
yeah. What was the name of that place in Crosby?
Red Hat Media.
Okay.
They're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do we need a motion on that?
Mhm.
I will make a motion that we go ahead and ask staff to do items 1 and 2 on phase 1 of the city parks improvement, with the addition of looking into a budget monies for marketing as our discussions put forth.
I'll second.
The only feedback I have, the other 4 remaining items are just outstanding then? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I don't think we're prepared to start until we get more to where what we've been discussing and what Joe was bringing up and that, I think we're, you know, I mean, I think the local option sales tax idea, for example, is a huge part of funding. If it doesn't take place, if people don't want to do that and we don't do it, then okay, what's plan B? Then we'll have to figure that out. So,
And while I do reference phase 2, phase 3 of those items, you'll notice that both of them are noted as 2024. So
Yeah.
really trying to work
Yeah.
together. We just try to group them as logically as possible, but
I think 1 and 2 under 23 is gonna be a lot. It's gonna have a lot of components to it. So. And I, you know, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw it out there. If the council's all here, if we want, then we got staff here to let them know that, you know, if some of this stuff, it's like, there's just no way it's gonna I can get there. I'm just too busy. That needs to be communicated to the city administrator, and then it needs to be communicated to us so that we can do that play. If we have to find like a red hat or somebody else to do it, then that's something that, you know, because to Joe's point, I's dotted, T's crossed, we don't miss something that costs big problem down the road, and we get public support. That's the key. So, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
the next item is our 2025 road bond. I realize it's 2025, but there is work to be done on the front end in order to prepare for the bond. So I've identified 3 phases, identifying the roads themselves. That would be done this year. I know Tom has already been working on that and has a list going, and at some point here, somewhere mid-year, we bring that forward for the council for your input and your direction. So we can talk about how many roads, which roads, what's going to happen with them, all of that, and get an initial first draft of a list that then in early 2024, well, end of 23, early 24, then we'd start to engage the residents on those roads that we've identified and get their feedback if there's any special requests that they might have or anything we need to know about from their perspective that we should be incorporating into the bond. That takes time. We want to make sure we're not rushed through that. Have those conversations, have that done and pretty much complete by June of 24, kind of mid-year 24, and then be in a position to early 25, late 24, I'll say early 25, issue a general obligation bond and plan for construction in 2025.
Question for Tom. Are there any other road projects or anything not defined on this list that you would see that may need to be added or you would hope to add?
So what happens with the roads is every spring I go and I drive every mile of city road that we have. And I assess the condition of it, so I could tell you what last year would look like a list of roads that we would need to do already. Each year it changes a little bit depending on how much that road deteriorates, but I think what you're gonna find is we're gonna have more miles of road to repair than what we have money to do. I think there's no limit. I mean, I can point out just a handful of, Church Street is one, City Hall Street's another one, Upper Roy. I mean, there's several other ones that I'm not mentioning, but you start looking at it that way and all of a sudden you have a lot of. So one thing we have tried to do in the past and we're trying to do more of is focus on an area. So for instance, if we go down Upper Roy, you try to get all the offshoot roads too. So that way you have a whole area that's new. And so you're moving from spot to spot in the city rather than jumping all over the place.
Sure.
If that
Alright.
makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. Is there, yeah, I was just wondering, if we need to play catch up anywhere or anything.
We're actually overall pretty good. I think what we will need to work on is, so when we did the first road bond, we didn't have a system in place for looking at the roads. They just, when they fell apart, that's when we did them. Well, now, the first run, we did a 40-year cycle. We said, okay, we're gonna try to put every road that we have on a 40-year cycle, and so in that 40-year span, each one would get rebuilt at least once, repaved, whatever. 40 years is probably excessive for our climate. So we probably have to shrink that down closer to 30 years in a lot of cases, maybe 20 years in some. So that will cause that to look different as we move forward too. The bonds will get a little bigger or come more often.
Sure.
I did have a question on, when we put that first one together
Mhm.
and you're looking at the 40-year cycle. I look at, for example, the road I live on will last a lot longer than Church Street's going to. Church Street's a feeder road. Do we need to, should we divide? I don't know if, could we divide our roads into just that feeder roads versus, and then,
Traffic counts, yes.
yeah, traffic, okay.
Mhm.
And then, I don't, say my road will last 30 years. I would say most likely Church Street would be 15, or 10,
Right.
whatever. Cause it was redone not all that long ago.
So one of the things it's done too is, if you have a more of a main road where there's a lot of truck traffic, we would treat it different, like for instance, you're familiar with what we did with Hazelwood. We built up the tonnage of it.
Yep.
Probably wouldn't do that to your street.
Right.
You might get just a simple.
But maybe to
resurfacing
Church
of that.
Street.
Huh?
Maybe to Church Street.
Maybe Church
Yeah.
Street would get a little better treatment, yeah.
Are we facing a point where, go back to that demographics when we were looking at the park thing? You're gonna start having a lot of grandparents with kids, grandkids, or even younger families that are still here and moving in. Are we at a point where maybe roads like Church Street need to be widened so that pedestrian traffic can get off more to the side? Cause it can be tight rate anyway, just passing two cars.
What we've talked about internally among the staff is, as we do the main roads like Upper Roy, if they don't have a separated trail, trying to figure out a plan to offer either a wider shoulder or a painted trail, something that would have along that route. So it's a little less expensive to do, but it does give you some of that
Okay.
safety of a trail. One other item that I thought of while we were chatting here a little bit is gravel roads. We're down to almost none of them left. And half of our remaining mileage of gravel road is Bass Lake Road. So we have about 1.5 miles remaining of gravel road. For instance, the end of Church Street is one. I think the city should work to eliminate the rest of that. We don't own a maintainer for one to deal with gravel roads. Our plows aren't well set up for gravel roads. It'd be wise for us just to try to eliminate the remaining gravel roads where possible. Park Avenue is another one coming out of the back of the fire hall.
How would you, Bass Lake Road, for example, do you make that do you pave it? Or do you make it a minimal maintenance road?
We allow Lakeshore to work with that one. Serves mostly their residents. We only have 1 or 2 residents that utilize it. I have no plan for Bass Lake Road at this time.
I know that Bass Lake Road, the issue with that is the water table.
Right.
The base itself, I mean, I've driven down Bass Lake Road in the spring and the water has been over the road at times. I remember doing that when I was deputy. So I'm just curious, that was one of the big discussions, was being able to tear all that up and actually build a roadbed that would last 10, 15, 20 years.
Better off to just bypass it, but that plan wasn't widely accepted. So I'm not floating it again.
Yeah. So, okay.
Same thing with, say, the swamp road here on Clark Lake. If there was a way
Yeah.
to eliminate that we should, because that will be coming up in a few years where we're gonna have to redo the base to support new pavement there.
Not much room there on that one.
No. But there was an idea to bypass that. I don't know if it's feasible to do so, but. You know, it's definitely something to look at when the time gets closer for that.
I know some of us suggested cutting out from, you stop at Adams Pest Control and then restart it up just past the, down near the dam, Johnson's property, but I don't know. I wouldn't like it, but then again,
What
you
was
gotta
our,
look at what.
sorry, what was our last bond? What did we have? What was that?
I don't know, what do you mean?
The last road bond we did? Dollars,
1.5.
1.5 million. Not even gonna ask with. And we did how many miles with that about? Like
I'd have to go back and.
Hazelwood was the longest.
Hazelwood was one, we did Smiley Road past Schaefer's. What
Okay.
else did we do? I think there was another one too, and, over here, Lower Cullen.
Wasn't the split, was it roughly 5 miles based on? Trying to keep that
Yeah, I wanna say it was
35,
like 7, but yeah,
37.
yeah, we have 31 and a half to cover.
The only other question I had on this is it possible, I know. And this is probably a good question for a thought process before, is it possible for us to do something sooner than later? Like maybe issue of the bond, because we know one's coming off. Right? So we're not running two at the same time was the goal. If I'm not mistaken.
Are you asking issue one sooner than later, meaning road bond versus the other bond we're talking, or are you talking 2 road bonds?
Well, I'm just saying if we issued the next road bond before this one was actually done.
Oh. Yes, we do have some debt service coming off line, so we will have additional debt service capacity to
Right,
have a larger bond than we did the first time, so that's good. I guess if that would come down to how much
I'm just-
time does it take to put that together, public engagement, things like that.
I think
I'm just trying to think of total miles that we should do. Not to, I don't want to play catch up, but if we find out that you need to. Anyway,
I'd like to allow at least a year of planning
yeah,
before we do the next road bond. I just think that we've rushed some of this stuff in the past and it
okay,
kind of bites us, so I'd like to
Okay.
have it well thought out, because I don't think we have anything that's an emergency right now for repairs.
anyone else got anything? Yeah, no. Entertain a motion on what we want to do with the road project.
I'll make a motion to move forward on the 2025 road bond as presented.
No second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Downtown master plan.
So we're actually going to add something to your list. I didn't reprint it because it's an important component, but it's not a really big complex thing. So as part of the shoreline ordinance rewrite that's happening right now, we do also need to update our zoning map once we get through that process, because a significant portion of our downtown area is in the shoreland, the shoreline rules apply. And we want to make sure that we are appropriately understanding the regulations and the requirements before we initiate a downtown master plan. It doesn't impact the timing of the master plan that I have presented, but I just wanted you to know that that will be a component that we need to incorporate before we do the downtown master plan. And Mark, you look puzzled.
I guess I'm puzzled too.
Yeah, so
Maybe you misspoke, but you said the downtown will now be zoned underneath the shoreline? Is that what I heard?
Yes, I'm going to ask Bethany. to
Does that
come
have
up.
to-
Yes.
Okay.
It's just that the north side, the what side, the where side?
Hi. So in downtown, I would say up to the chamber is within 1,000 feet from Nisswa Lake. And so that puts it under the regulation of the shoreland rules 6120 of the state of Minnesota. I don't believe that we have any provisions in place nor performance standards to address that. So before we move to do a plan for the downtown area, I would like to ensure that we are addressing our statutory responsibilities in that sense.
I agree.
Yep. Okay, sure.
Yep.
Are we going to, well, two questions. Are we going to tackle then, the commercial and the highway frontage and all of those things at the same time with this then?
That's a good question. Just interestingly enough, I got a conditional approval today from the DNR for our ordinance revisions that we're doing right now. They understand that we're doing this in phases and there's only so much that can be done at one time. However, their approval is conditional upon us addressing PUDs, commercial resorts and other areas that are located within that 1,000 foot of public water, 300 feet from any stream or river. So we'll need to look into all of that and how that relates to our other commercial areas. We'll have to see how that works. My intent is that we deal with shoreland first. I think that's the most important to make sure that we are meeting 6120. And then as far as what we would like to do with highway business, central business outside of the shoreland, that's what I would like to do. So this zoning map is basically what I think would be the easiest is that everything within shoreland has its own specific zoning. It's either commercial or it's residential, but it's shoreland. And then in that, we would have performance standards. In that, we would have those things. Now, we've done most of the work with the ordinance revisions that we've just completed. So the next would be the commercial. And then outside of that, we could leave the zoning areas. I'm not asking to like redo anything. We're not adding any more requirements. These are requirements that already exist as far as the shoreline is concerned. And we would just make that very easy for property owners, business owners, to be able to understand what they can and can't do on their property. Any questions?
I would encourage us though, in this process to do the commercial and the highway and everything all at once with this at all possible. Just because of the nature of the conflict between the two. And then also for the future of Nisswa. You know, last time we met, one of our things that we had instructed Jenny to do was to look at those backage roads,
Mhm.
stuff like that. And right now with those backage roads and stuff, all that zoning
Mhm.
would need attention with the backage roads. So I think we just want to get out ahead of all that, you know, and if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so for
try
the
to do
highway,
it together.
yeah, the highway business district has some pretty good provisions right now. The problem is when that highway business district also lies within the shoreland. So we just need to clean that area up. I wasn't proposing necessarily changing any performance standards or changing any density requirements or anything in that highway business. That's kind of a separate thing. Quite honestly, that's something, if we determined that we needed that change, that would be a fairly easy process to do.
Do you have a timeline as to get that back to us?
The zoning map,
Mhm.
the DNR would like to see those things taken care of within the next year.
So the sooner
So-
better than later.
Yeah, and in the timeline presented, I would like to work on that because there's a lot that I can do on as far as just working with the DNR, working with those agencies to formulate that plan that won't cost any additional money. That's just something that we need to work through. I did reach out to Widseth to see what it would cost to work with their staff to redo the zoning map. And they said about that 2,500.
Are you going to keep the density map the same then currently is what you said?
Yes. So my plan is to kind of go through each zoning district one by one and revise if necessary. I think there's a few zoning districts and provisions that are perfectly fine. But if anybody wants to see anything looked at,
Well, I just question if we're going through all this work, why don't we look at the density and everything all together? Sooner or later, Nisswa is gonna need apartment buildings. Things like that. And why don't we just address this now versus spend the 2,500 now, 2,500 again later and do this? Can we have a bigger discussion and look at our densities, low, medium, high densities, things like that we currently don't have, and just incorporate it all together?
Yeah, so the 2,500 is just to reprint and redo and
Right.
GIS and all of that as far as the zoning map. As far as performance standards, that's just an issue of us deciding what we want and what the people of Nisswa want. And then we can change those based on that. I don't think that we would want to change those areas that are already zoned highway business. I don't think we would want to turn them into anything else. Highway business is great. It's a zoning district that allows mixed use, that goes for higher density, goes for commercial uses. So I think that's a pretty great zoning. I wouldn't propose to change that to either be strictly residential or strictly one or the other.
Correct, but maybe we could look at pervious coverages, different thing like that. Density on properties
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that would be something as we work
versus
through the
90% or 50.
PUD.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm. It's fun, isn't it? Thank you.
Thanks, Bethany. Yeah, there's always something that comes up. And so just then knowing that that will happen this year doesn't change our proposed recommendation to work on an RFP. Barring any, things that come up that would push this out a little bit longer, but developing the request for proposal for consultant services for this downtown master plan, early 24. Getting that in line and issuing the RFP to a firm to have that work done and engagement for the spring, summer, fall of 24 with a report to the council by the end of the year would be our recommendation at this time. We'd look to incorporate traffic counts, infrastructure needs. We talked today about ADA. Concerns or questions or improvements. I mean, there's a host of components to this study for sure, but we would work to incorporate all of that at the time we develop that RFP.
So what do we get for 35,000 exactly?
It would be similar to the Parks Master Plan, that report that we received the council received last week. That's what you would get, is there would be ideally some process engagement with the community to say, what do you want? What do you need? All those things incorporate into some options. Then we'd vet through those options, get some more feedback, and then be presented with, this is how the city should look to plan out the next 15, 20, 30 years, whatever that is, for how we invest in our infrastructure improvements, accessibility, walkability. Are we looking to add different components, reroute downtown roads, how they function? I mean, all of that would be on the table so that we know then when we're putting money into improvements, that this is for the long-term goal.
I don't know.
And certainly we're not recommending we start today, so that
Right.
can change. I mean, certainly that's part of more conversation, but I know this has been something we've been looking to do. We've got some challenges with, some of the interactions with vehicles and pedestrians, and, how can we set our downtown up for success, and maybe what some creative ideas might be out there.
Yeah, and just in my mind, looking at this, to just spend more money to do drawings right now on this. If we draw this now, but we don't have the final design done for the park that we just talked
Yep.
about, things like that, this would just seem premature, and I would vote that we'd concentrate on the park versus just do this, because if we do this and we don't have the park finalize what we may or may not do with the pickle, things like that, I would just view this at this point as a waste of money.
So what I would say is with this information, we would in theory bring back to the council this request come end of 23, early 24 to say, do you want to still do this now? Is the timing right? Do we need to wait? What does that look like? But at least this gives you an idea of where on our radar this project is. So if you support this generally, we're not going to just go run out and issue a contract with a consultant. Obviously, we'd have a lot more conversation with the council before we do that. And there's a lot of things in play between now and then.
Yeah, I'd say this would go on the back burner.
Yeah, my general opinion about the steps are, I think they're accurate, good there, but let's make a note to perhaps revisit this at end of year in December. And then we can discuss it again, and if so need, then push it back again.
Yeah, I don't have a problem revisiting it. I just, that the master park plan that we did approve. I think one of the key components that HKGI took into was how it sinks in with the whole downtown. It's all one kind of moving picture, so. Okay,
I think the pickle will be the big
yeah,
portion of that that's gonna sink into this now. It is our next topic, so
Coming up next, yes.
let's keep
Yes.
that in
Yeah.
mind as we go about this.
yeah,
You want a motion?
so we
on
just
this?
need to address this at a later date.
I'm fine. That's the consensus of the council for this one. We will just
Okay.
make sure to schedule this in for end of year to revisit
No.
in light of everything else that
Okay.
will be coming up. Great. We're nearing towards the end, so pickle improvements. Lot going on here.
Yeah.
As we know, there are some challenges with the building. The building is aging, significant improvements are needed. So looking at broadly, creating a RFP for a consultant to evaluate the building needs. And concurrently with that, an RFP for a consultant to evaluate the financial health of the liquor fund. If we're going to potentially issue a bond, that would be my recommendation for funding, is a revenue bond. That would probably be a 15-year bond. I think we'd want to make sure that we're doing all the things we need to do we have 2 successful liquor operations, but I think that would be important to consider the need to have that assurance that we're on the right track. So looking to get those things in process here by April. Again, this can be adjusted. If you think this is too fast in light of everything else, we can adjust it. But for discussion purposes, proposing to start that in April. Hiring both consultants. Ideally, they'd work together and they would assess the building deficiencies, provide recommendations, similar to the parks process as well. I mean, addressing all of the components for the pickle and having that financial component also working in support with the consultant doing more of the physical building impact for that and bringing those recommendations back to the city by the fall of this year. So we can assess and see what our viable options are for moving forward with whatever building improvements would be feasible, financially palatable to the community. Some of those components, we'd have to get some more details into that, but by the end of the year, essentially, the idea would be to determine funding sources and options for what we could do at the pickle to make the necessary improvements. From there, it's just, then we get into the nuts and bolts. If we've decided that we're still doing something, then we get into the nuts and bolts of the bond and the project and things like that. But I think the big questions are now, how do we facilitate getting that information?
Well, I think previously from what we heard from Tom, I mean, it's going to be a big bill to do everything that needs to be done there. I mean, should we also assess, if our price tag comes in to improve the pickle at $1.2 million, who knows? So can we assess at that time, do we either do the improvements or do we look at replacing the pickle. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, yes, but is this $50,000 a projection of what it's gonna be to have an independent consultant come out to evaluate the building?
Yes, for both, I would think we'd be spending,
Okay.
again, that was just my rough
So-
estimate for,
I think I can save ourselves 50 grand tonight.
Mhm.
Let's say that we want to knock it down.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's.
I think
pretty
we all
simple.
do.
also.
No, I
what
don't
does that- what does that
symbolically.
look Like,
That's just-
then what are we
See,
doing? That's
but-
part of that, right?
But I want to back up even a step farther too, and look at the big picture, you know, I'm excited that I'm on the liquor committee. We are a city running a business, and before we can decide what needs to be done with this building and all of that, we need to decide who we are, you know, so every business, I'll say, has a mission statement, a purpose, who's their clientele, who they're gonna serve, what's the demographics, how can we make this grow? Do we want to introduce food to it? Do we want to have it also cater for our own community center building for events? You know, like what could we do with it? It's probably the biggest untapped revenue source in the city right now that we have. And we kind of have a monopoly with the location, with the spots, with the liquor agreement. And so I think before we would hire anybody to move ahead with any sort of plans, we need to figure out all that stuff. What, you know, we know what the pickle is now, but what do we want the pickle to be? What do we want it for the Nisswa, you know? Should we even have the pickle? I mean, I don't know. I think all that stuff needs to be hashed out first and just, yeah, we need to start running it like a business if we're gonna own the business. We need, you know, I guess us in this room would act as the owners of the business. It's not Terry's job over there. He does a great job managing it and stuff, but it's our job to make it grow, make it be successful. And with integration with the park, we got to define all that stuff first. And once again, I just think it'd be premature to waste this money. I mean, the information that Tom's given us, just listening to Terry, the building has to go down. I don't know that needs to have a lot of discussion around it. And so it also frees up any confining things that we have. Should we do this? Should we do that? No, let's take 2 seconds to maybe dream a little bit about what it can be and what it could do for the city before we move ahead. That's just my opinion.
I don't disagree. I definitely agree with you on the point that even just rough estimates of overall repair of the building, it's why would that even be remotely financially feasible to just Band-Aid that building? But if we're gonna put a timeline together for it, then perhaps maybe we go end of first quarter to come up with a overall agreed assessment of how to go about it, of what the redesign of the pickle will be, what it will entail. Coordinate with Terry to see what input he has based off of demands for per se a restaurant, right? My question, I guess, is health of the fund of the liquor fund. I mean, we're not. What's the purpose of determining that, I guess?
Well, I think it would be an appropriate question to evaluate, you know, overall pickle revenues, consistency with that, you know, net profit or loss in a given year, and same for spirits.
Yeah.
We talked about at the liquor committee meeting, pricing.
Sure.
How
Okay.
often are we evaluating
I figured
that?
as such. I just want.
Yeah, and I think that's,
Which I think we all kind of came to an assessment that they're
might just be metrics that we need to be aware of more than we are now.
updating them, say like the pricings where we.
Right,
Terry
and
thought
maybe
money
come
was
up with
being
a
left
more consistent routine and schedule for doing that. You said, Jesse, first quarter, meaning 23 first quarter?
If we set if we're trying to put dates to keep everything moving forward, so
Yep.
it doesn't get stagnant, because we know that this is an obvious need. You can go in there, you're in there for 10
Right.
minutes and you smell like a grease trap after you're in there for a bit, and that's not even fair to the employees we asked to go work there, such as Terry per se, right? So if we can try to keep momentum on it, if we put what's the proper way to, what's a good way to call it, but if an initial assessment internally of
We need the system put in place, how we this is another thing. How do we tackle this? You know, let's dream about first, line this stuff up, our system's missing. In how we tackle a project like this, you know, and I don't know, I'd be willing to help facilitate this, you know, as a model that we can use. It's the same model for the parks, what you just talked about or anything. And how to go into this, and I think that we can do a lot of front end work internally, in-house, listening to the employees, talking, kind of writing that down before we go and spend some dollars, you know, and incorporate it with all the other, you know, parks or public works or whatever. You know, this would also be something that I'd like to see a committee put together on, you know, possibly, and let's have people over the community or whatever, just get together, you know. I don't know, has this question ever been asked? Hey, you know, what would we want this pickle to be like, you know?
So what it makes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that, as far as a consultant to evaluate the building's needs, that the only need the building has is to go away. I think it's
I'm
done.
sorry, that wasn't very clear. I thought that was kind of an,
I'm
thing,
sorry,
but
no,
I
I'm
just
not-
was
I'm
like,
not-
we
no.
needed to, you know.
Typically, this is
basically,
how, typically, this
plan
is
works.
exactly how we do it. We evaluate everything. In this particular case, I think, but, I know Terry was gonna go, did he share with you? I talked to Terry before he went down to I think it was down St. Paul, there was a conference. He said he had talked to a number, when he came back, he told me he talked to a number of different managers that they had just built a new bars and stuff, municipals. And he had a lot of ideas, he had a lot of information and stuff. Did he share that with anybody?
No.
Okay.
That's
So that, you know, because it's like everything else. So, he had a lot of ideas of what was taking place. And I think with that came costs too, you know, this is what it ended up costing us. So, yeah, but I think at the same time, I mean, the pickle factory paid for the first city hall. Pickle factory has paid for a lot of stuff in this community over its years, but it doesn't bring in the profit necessarily that it could. So, and I don't know what it is that's missing, if it's a marketing plan, if it's, you know, what are we trying to accomplish here, a mission, et cetera. But the liquor fund, the pickle factory, the liquor funds were established by the city, obviously, to supplement the budget for the city. That was its main purpose. Not just to run a business, but I think in this case, you know, where do we, you know, if the revenue bond and then if you're going to do a revenue bond, if that's the idea, you're going to need to make sure that the revenues can actually support it on a reoccurring basis. It's not just this year did good, next year did bad. So, and it links in with the parks. It links in this. I mean, that was all discussed at all the meetings and stuff over all that. So,
So based on the feedback, I would suggest that this go to the liquor committee for initial input, feedback, ideas, plans, and
I was just writing that down, actually,
Great.
perhaps a liquor committee meeting in
Yep.
March sometime, where we can review a set plan for the future of the pickle factory, get all of Terry's inputs, opinions, and reconvene to try to set an actual set plan going forward.
I think from the liquor committee as well, we would need, this council would like a recommendation to have a separate, like a subcommittee set up. You know, if that's because again, we're back to staff who only has X amount of time too.
Right.
So, if we could set up a separate committee and then what you all think that should look like, you know, between community people, maybe someone from the chamber, you know, people that can have that input, that can do some of the legwork and running and stuff and whatnot and get the ideas back. So.
sounds like a great motion.
Okay, I second.
No, looking for a
Any other
motion.
comment? I'll also make a motion for it. I'll make a motion that we establish a liquor committee meeting in the month of March to establish everything aforementioned.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Okay, to be honest, I thought that was the last big project, but no, we have recycling center. Probably that one is, yeah, the last big project. So we have recycling center, compost, gravel storage, police shooting range, and police impound lot. It's a very complex project with a lot of potential components to it. It has been it's come to the council. The council wanted more specific information related to availability for how we could use the parks land, if at all. We've received that information back. We've explored looking at other options for locations downtown. The Public Works Committee is looking at the curbside recycling ordinance right now, and I believe the idea was then, once that was in place, to bring forward a recommendation to the council as far as the ultimate location goes. But I know that Councilmember Hall brought up having that on the March council agenda for discussion. So certainly, I think this is a good time to talk about what we'd like to see here, where we'd like to go. I'll have Tom ready for questions or feedback, but looking to get answers on some of those components, and then determine funding source is still to be determined depending on the number of components that are actually incorporated into the project, and how we get through developing that final plan and actually doing it.
The one question I have on the overall project cost for, just the three of, this would be a bond, obviously, potentially.
I
We
don't,
could bond, and,
yeah,
hopefully
you
to
could.
incorporate with other things.
yes, you
Okay.
could.
Um.
So
Where did? Go ahead.
Oh. I mean, I think decision just needs to be made, move it out to the gravel pit.
Yep.
Makes most sense. Put it in, lay it out for future accommodations for the police department, for a fire range out there. I don't know that the work has been fully done in that area to provide the best firing range that they need. And so I'd say we'll table that, but we want to accommodate for that out there in the future. But just move it out there, and then, next year, bring in the curbside recycling for the residents in downtown. It can't stay where it is. Needs to move out there. No sense in buying other property for it. And just get it moved out there. And I don't know, as far as financing, maybe some of the, is it AP or ARPA money?
ARPA money, yep.
Yeah, use that to help fund this, but just get it moved out there this summer while we can. One component, with the I haven't looked into details, on the compost and stuff like that. However, also knowing a little bit about that end of it too. A lot of municipalities do not get into that themselves. For instance, Mike's Tree Service has the contract for both Brainerd and Baxter down there, and they send that out to a private rather than do that in-house because of what that takes time-wise and stuff and equipment to do that. Might be an area to save money and to, maybe even contract with Mike's ourselves and see if we could get in down there, like Brainerd and Baxter is doing.
The shooting range aspect has been approached. I've been working with the police department on it. And there's a few things that we know we need to do. For example, the building of berms, they have to be a minimum of 25 feet high from the shooting, from the target level. And because of the way that's laid out, that doesn't necessarily mean you got to build a 25-foot berm. So there's things that are in the process, and I know Craig and Todd will work with Tom and Mike on that. And some of that to be done, we don't necessarily have the right equipment to build the berm. But talking with Tom, you know, those kinds of things are, it's probably easier when you do everything, just have whoever comes in to do this, build that berm. The one thing I think we got to do is, you know, I don't have an issue with moving it out there. I think that's great. It needs to be fenced off. And I don't know what that cost is today. I know the bids and stuff were a little older than that we had, so that would all have to be.
Does the current fence not work?
There's only a partial fence in place, and so, for instance, because we have the impound cars out there, they need a more substantial fence.
Sure.
And same with the shooting range, we don't want to just have the
Yep.
general public have access to it. So the whole site would have been fenced in with chain link fence as opposed to the barbed wire you're probably familiar with. And then the impound and the shooting range would be segregated from that.
Sure.
As far as the details of the shooting range and some of the other stuff too. Remember that what we have is a concept plan. There's a lot of detail to it, but there would be some final, like, for instance, they would talk to the police chief, do some final engineering before we'd ever send that out to bid. Once you decide that you want to move forward with that project.
And it would be a work in progress. There'd be multiple phases to it. The initial phase, when you do it, you want to make sure that you got the concrete pads poured where you're going to need them for your targets, those kinds of things. You're going to want to run your power in now where you need the power to go, and whatnot. And then you're also going to need to make sure that it's positioned in such a way that you get the 100-yard distance, at least one or two lanes of 100 yards that you can shoot at. But mainly the shooting takes place from a 25-yard line to the target or closer. And then you can slowly, as I explained I worked with the chief and I explained to both of them, there's shooting clubs in the area that are willing to help out, you know, phase by phase, do fundraisers, things like that to help get it built out and stuff. So it's just the base. It's now a usable range, and I have a place to put a shed that, if you've seen the shed they have down there, it will look good on top of the fire pile. It's pretty bad shape. And so to that extent for that, but like Tom said, the other one thing is you want to make sure that it's as secured off from the public as you can. So somebody doesn't go in there and use it, and whatnot.
I think Mark's unmuted. You might want to ask the other question or comment.
What's that? Mark?
Hello?
Yep.
Yes, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was wondering, were you asking me a question? Because I couldn't hear.
No,
You were unmuted, so I didn't know if you wanted to comment.
Oh, I see. Yeah, no, it's just that this is a very emotional, has been a very complicated issue. And I think we got many good ideas on what people wanted to do, is what Jenny was mentioning, that we've actually gone through that process of talking with people and the state and the federal. But I think I agree with like what was said, that we already have the property out there. It's at it's there at the city water or the city sewer area, and to have to buy another piece of property to try to satisfy the state, and those items right there just are not feasible in my mind. But we will be making that, hopefully we'll be talking about that more. I know that Tom was talking about the revenue. How are we going to make this a revenue stream, or is it just going to be free? And then we still have like the same arrangement that we have with the county at this point. And there's questions whether the county will continue with that or not. So I think those are some of the other issues that are we'll be talking about hopefully at this next meeting.
No, I'll entertain 'em. If there's any, isn't anything else, unless anybody has anything else, what do we want to recommend?
I recommend that we move it out to the gravel pit and get it set up out there, and also entertain the contracts for curbside pickup here in the city.
Well, are we jumping the gun from do we want a recommendation from them first for the curbside?
I would recommend that we do that because otherwise we're eliminating what has been the people's opinions up to this point.
I missed something.
I think Mark was saying recommendations should come from the Public Works Committee, or that's what his preference is, and I think that's maybe they can make sure that comes in March for the council to discuss this at a regular meeting in March. Might be well received that way, but then that would give you the opportunity to make that decision and move that component forward.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say. Was it difficult to hear what I was saying, or?
Oh, I missed it. I'm sorry, Mark. It's just me.
No.
Okay. So then are we gonna just set this aside until we hear from the Public Works Committee then? Or
I would do that.
At the end
or
of the,
at the end of the day, we're gonna make a decision,
at the end of the day, we need to make a decision.
right?
So it comes down to us, nothing against Public Works, but
Well,
we just gotta get this moved on so the city can focus on other things.
we need, that was the purpose of having the committee, Tom.
Right.
I just was gonna add for the curbside recycling, we have a draft ordinance for that, for the haulers prepared. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have our meeting last week to finalize that for a recommendation for you. But it's boilerplate, it's largely done. We just had to discuss the fee for the license application and the application itself for that, but I think that's largely a formality that
Has the
All-
city attorney
all
looked
done.
at it and gone through it for you?
it's already an ordinance in Pequot and Pine River. We just changed some of the language to work for Nisswa, but certainly can be reviewed by the attorney if you wish.
So I would recommend that maybe the Public Works Committee can try to get a meeting before the next regular council meeting. Bring you the curbside ordinance. I don't know if there would be enough time because we'd have to publish the ordinance. 10 days notice and all, we'd have to work through depending on when the committee meeting, so whether the ordinance itself is at March or April, but you can still have that conversation about moving the recycling center location if that's your desire at the March meeting. And we're sort of really not holding things up from that perspective, to then start to work towards the next steps.
In the meantime, could we have Tom update the current bids or start to work that way? Or are those updated now?
Those are current estimates, maybe week and a half old.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay,
Super.
all right.
Yep.
I'm good with that.
So,
Is that clear then?
Yes, I'm assuming that Councilmember Hall is okay rescinding his motion since there was no second anyways. To move the gravel pit now, we'll make that
Sure.
decision in
I'll wait a
few
couple
weeks,
more days.
right?
Couple more weeks.
a couple more days. Perfect. Council will await Public Works recommendation. Come to the March meeting.
so then we can just set this one aside.
Various land purchases. So I identified that I would be heading up this effort to start. Certainly, there are a lot of components and things trying to balance longer range planning with current projects and needs that we have. That's the next one. Maybe I flipped my sheet too quick. There we go. just finding opportunities to have those conversations. I think we've, in the past missed some potential uses for land that we could have acquired to help make our lives easier for, infrastructure improvements and things like that. So I would certainly, working with the council, of course, but, if parcels come up, or we're aware of parcels that we want to engage property owners to see if they would be interested in selling, or if some actually come for sale. We have a lot of projects there. We have future needs, city water, for example. So we want to keep that in the back of our mind as far as looking for those opportunities. But I did tell department heads today that is an effort largely, I think, belonging with me to start. And then certainly as projects are impacted, departments are impacted by projects, we would bring in staff as appropriate, but I didn't want them to feel like that was the burden that they needed to have right now. But this is a component of a lot of other projects, potential projects coming down the line in the future. And if there's opportunity to purchase land, what I'm working with our financial advisor is, can we pay for it and then potentially bond to recoup that money? Or do we have to have that money in savings account now to be able to cut the check? I need to know some of those details so we know exactly what we're dealing with, because real estate can be expensive. So we want to make sure we have in place what we can. But so broad, something that I'd be working on as opportunities arise, and would work with the council as appropriate, and then bring in staff as needed. Sound okay? Okay. And the northwest and southeast package roads, we talked about this last week as far as applying for the community project funding to see if we can get some funding opportunity from there. So that is where that is at, and I will keep you in the loop and how that's progressing. Any questions on that one?
No.
And lastly, city water. So this is a significant project with a lot of components to it. What I would propose is that a phase one sort of researched stage is researching how other cities have implemented a city water system, and what kind of timeline might that look like that we would actually be able to implement. So similar to building a municipal liquor store, other cities have done that. Let's maybe look to them to see how that process worked for them. I'd apply that same approach for city water and see who's added a city water system and what we can learn from their process, and bring some initial information to you towards the end of the year, so we maybe know a little better what we're dealing with, as opposed to just, this is a great idea, and how do we jump right into doing that. But open to feedback or suggestions. This one's just a really big one to wrap your arms around.
Anyone?
I've just seen some cities, towns, hamlets, smaller than Nisswa, that have city water. And I just wonder how they do it. It's, to
They
see.
likely have other funding opportunities that Nisswa does not, because of tax base.
Right. I look at LaPorte, they've got a city water system, and then small little hamlet next to them have it. And I'm like, how do these towns of 100 people get city water? It's expensive. So where there's a will, there's a way.
They don't have lakeshore zoning in their downtown.
That's a good idea.
We are special. in this
Or a
one,
$1
yes.
billion
Not the only
market
one,
cap,
Yeah.
real estate value.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those thresholds are a blessing, but sometimes a curse when it comes to things like these, but
Oh, yeah.
tapping into some relationships and trying to see how much massaging it would take to try to be able to get this from a federal level. It's not gonna come from the state, but maybe some of that $17.8 billion surplus within the state of Minnesota will come this way, so.
Have we ever thought about bringing together our state representatives and our federal representatives, Mr. Stauber and stuff, to see what their ideas are, how they can help us?
Engage their input. Yeah, certainly. We've starting to build those relationship with their staff and getting to know them more on a state and federal level. It's just that, it takes time to build the rapport, but engaging with them and inviting them here and showing them as we maybe complete some of these other projects and kind of new and exciting things going on, that just helps them to have familiarity with Nisswa and probably helps them to come back around when we need some support. They're probably more inclined to do that. So, yeah.
Well, I think we need to look at the city water, so I would make a motion that we approve the phase one aspect of what Jenny's she's requesting. Go ahead and start looking into it. That's, you wanted a
Sure, that'd be great.
Yep, I second that.
any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
So now we circle back to the city hall improvements. Any other different feedback now that you've gone through the whole document of the other projects? Talking about trying to focus on the structural improvements that the building needs. Do we want to do that separately outside of trying to bundle that with other projects and potentially a bond, or do we want to try to bring those together?
how soon can we know what we can bond all together or not?
Couple weeks.
By the next meeting.
Yeah, by the regular meeting. Yeah, I would.
By our next regular meeting?
Yeah.
I think we should bring it up then.
Okay.
Cause I think that makes a big difference.
We didn't identify a lot of other areas that we were gonna bond though, except
Yeah.
for the road.
Well, yeah, the road was a separate thing, but if we look at,
Camp Lincoln, recycling center and the components of that
correct,
potentially.
Yep.
Mhm.
yep. That will also give staff a better, you know, that if there's a funding mechanism that are in place, then it's not, you know, it's not like we're gonna end up putting it on hold. If we can combine a number of things, that would
Sure.
be great.
Or the pickle. Can you include the pickle on you have a revenue bond listed on the pickles segment, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
Can it be snowballed into city hall improvements, Camp Lincoln?
Well, we can, yes, we could issue a revenue bond if we're saying we're relying on the revenues from that enterprise fund to pay for said improvements for different things. I
But
just don't know if we're talking a
Is
major
the fire
project.
department roof budgeted?
So that could be incorporated as well.
I'm just, but.
We're a ways
But
out.
now
on
you're
revenue
back
bond.
to, now you're back to the feasibility of that revenue stream, i.e. the pickle being able to support the bond. At what height, at what amount? Because if they're only making, say, $200,000 of profit a year,
Lower than that.
huh?
I think it's.
I know it's lower than that,
Yeah.
but I'm saying if you're only making a $200,000 profit a year, you're gonna eat all of that plus what else up to make the bond payments over X, you know, depending what the height of the bond is. I think it gets messy. I think that the pickle would be better off standing alone on its own merits. So that we can continue to operate it as we hopefully make it more profitable and do the market aspects of things and like we were talking.
We don't know if we need the bond yet either, you know, we want the feedback from all the staff on what we might want to do in here. So,
Well,
you know, we need to do.
Plus
the-
there's, what can we?
Right,
put
we need
into
to
it.
do the roof stuff like that, and that could come out of the general fund, but that's too smaller of a dollar amount to bond for. Let's just not spend money to spend money either.
Well, no, and that's why I would be nicer to take, you know, instead of taking anything out of the general fund, which I would say everything that can be rolled into a bond would be. And I think that's one thing we found out with the building matrices that were done last year. When we've been working with everybody, is there is not going to be a way to feasibly budget every year enough money to put aside to maintain all the bill. It's gonna end up being a bonded issue periodically when things come up, most likely. But, you know, if we can figure that out, then we could incorporate this in and if we can have as much of that info by the next council meeting, we could all make a call then.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. I'll bring some
That
information
work
back and
for
then
everybody?
we'll just hold on this one.
Yeah.
Until we've got a little more info. That sounds great. Well, thank you for going through all of that. That was quite a bit, but
Yeah,
we've talked about a lot. There's that 2025 and beyond document. You tell me if you want to get into anything with that tonight or if we've,
Personally, I'd
We've
like to
covered-
look at it a little more, and if we have questions, do it.
we can revisit, obviously,
It's
this conversation
2025.
anytime. Yep.
I mean, the 2025 issue that we did make a decision on, or that roads stuff, we got that.
Yeah, a significant amount of work happens prior to that time.
But I'm open to whatever the rest of you want to do.
Could you put that up on the screen, Danny?
Sure. Yeah, phase 2 of the Gull Lake Trail, which is the CASA 77 portion that will likely remain unfinished after this year. City park improvements, actually constructing the improvements that we talked about earlier. 23, 24 is planning phase, 25 and beyond would be actual construction phase for that. Future expansion of trails, just in general, incorporating that conversation with our road projects conversation. Like we talk about, is that a detached trail? Is it a sidewalk? Is it a larger shoulder? Things like that. Camp Lincoln Road parcels, again, the second, third, and fourth phases, we talk about actually constructing trails, interpretive signs, is there a picnic shelter, other potential additions to that property. New emergency services building, the shorter term or the thing just keeping in mind sort of in the near term is land options for that future location. So we can set future councils and staff up to be able to do something should they want to do that. I think would be really the place where we want to be right now with that. And I think that might, and then 2 sewer items, rebuilding lift station 1. 2026 proposed at this time, and then new lift station 12 to be determined, somewhat city developer related, also contingent on potential funding through the federal dollars that we'll apply for as well. So that is the longer term list.
Is it worthwhile to start considering writing grants for, or starting that process for Camp Lincoln? Since it's gonna take a year and a half to receive those funds? Would it be worthwhile? Thoughts?
Yes, yeah, I mean, I would certainly think we should do what we can and identify opportunities for the trails is the big thing. I think everyone was excited for having trails and some interpretive signs, and that would be a great first step. So we will definitely keep that in the back of our mind as far as working through that. If that works.
Yep.
Okay. That's all I had. Anything else for me? I appreciate your time and feedback. I think this helps give us a lot of direction on what we're going to work on, and we will build in staff updates for the council as well throughout the year.
Anyone have anything else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
All second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.